Good day, Dr. R. Michael Fisher here. I want to continue the series of probably for the last year or more on close encounters with psychiatry. And this is my personal experiences with the psychiatric profession, or what I call psychiatric experiencing. But also, it's just my interest, because I'm not a psychiatrist per se, in child psychic and psychic experiences, and that includes the vast range, not just spiritual psychic or anything like that. I'm talking about just psychological or psychiatric kinds of experiencing. And so we're always talking about mental health here. That's the framing that I use, and ideas of mental illness. But I want to see if I can come at this, because I'm a very transdisciplinary thinker, in different ways. So this is my alteration. It's kind of my trans cultural, psychiatric, trans mutational approaches to the process of learning, healing, the woundedness that we all experience in different ways, etc. So, wearing a t-shirt today just to honor Every Child Matters, and that really means that their mental health matters most to me, of course, in because that's what I tend to focus on. And there are many other things that we ought to matter about and give attention to unconditionally and conditionally, in terms of the rights of children, the rights of them to have a well meaning and well healthy life that would be important to any kind of human sanity, or what we might call civilization. So, on all of those first notes, this one is going to be an interesting chat. I'm just going to move into a few thoughts of what has come to me from some observations of myself, particularly, and what has been a phobia that is a late onset phobia that I've been dealing with, and what is basically fundamentally, in many ways, it's an unrequited love, and it's a insult. So that's a whole package and string if you're interested in the power of an insult and a narcissistic wound. And I could use some other terms from the psychiatric tradition that really still have a commonsensical value. And the child in me right now is with me to let you know I've been dealing a lot with it in the last 6 months because of this phobic reaction, and what seems to be very irrational. And I rationally know it's irrational, but that doesn't help the problem. It keeps appearing in a very specific context. So it's not like it's, you know, horrible to live with, because it's only when I put myself in a very specific context, which is a womb like condition or a womb space, which is a tent, a pup tent in a dark outside wilderness experience, for example, or even just at a campground. And I'm not going to go into all the details of how I've experienced that, but it onset very quickly, and it was connected, as I remember, with what felt like a very deep insult from a partner who I was intimate with, and they thought they were just giving me truthing feedback, but it put me into an amazing tailspin. It's not the first time I've had those tailspins from people truthing with me, especially people that you love and care about, and they do something, or sometimes they just say it. And it's like words can't go backwards, right? What you said counts, it matters. And it doesn't just matter to me as the adult, it matters to me as the teenager I am and the child that I am. And so, in a way, the I am is the child, the adolescent, the adult, the post adult, and even our spiritual unitary being that is none of those labels. You get a picture of where I'm going to go today. So, let me arc out and start with this idea of the womb and the importance. So, in this great book, highly recommend, on the developmental 5 stages of life. And that's a generic approach to development. It is not a scientific alone. It is very existential, very spiritual, and transpersonal. That's Sam Keen, a really important theorist. You can look him up if you want, written many books. And he talks about really interesting stuff about, I think, very real, very phenomenologically accurate. Of course, always with his problems, and I have some critiques and there's deviations, but it gets to really fundamental ideas about how humans develop and could look at a map of their own development ahead of themselves as to what am I going through now, where could I be going? And the 5 stages are really simple. The child, and that's what I'll read a bit from tonight, then the rebel, the teenager, then the adult, which is what most of us recognize as the end of our journey as a person. And no, Sam Keen quite rightly has 2 more stages after the adult. And those are really important if you're at all interested in existential and transpersonal development. And the one after adult is the outlaw, he calls it, and then the lover. And he called this 5 stages of loving for the reason that we're all born and meant to be lovers. That's not just sexual. This is what he calls our eros, the erotic and domain. Again, not just sexual by any means. You'll have to read the book to get the full of that or see one of his talks. But it's eros as life, as the passionate life. And that's the title of this book, right? The passionate life. But in that passion life is a huge erotic crisis. I'm quoting him. And that affects the child, the rebel, the adult, the outlaw, and the lover. It affects our development. It can stall us at any one of the earlier stages so that we do not advance and progress into later stages of human maturity, of human consciousness, and its possibilities for us as beings, becoming. He's all about being, becoming, and then becoming really at the highest level is a kind of unitary state of the lover in its mature form. Very few of us reach that level of development without a lot of discipline, a lot of healing, and perhaps good luck, chance, and your karma. I don't know. But he doesn't theorize about that. He just lays out the development. So one of the aspects I'm going to pick up on, because it's related to my late onset phobia and what I'd call my psychiatric experiencing, where, yeah, I'm pretty close sometimes to like in that freaked out state and the after effects of it, which go on for a long time, and a kind of obsessive neurosis that goes with feeling insulted and then again being triggered when I'm in the dark. I'm in a womb space. I'm in something that feels and ought to be really safe and all, nice and curled up in a fetal position. Yeah, I can feel really safe, and I've used that position actually in a lot of my regulating processes to come down out of my various post-traumatic reactions. And I have many because I've had many, many traumatic wounds in my life, as some of you have no doubt as well, or know of people who have. It's very complicated and complex, these dynamics of the trauma and its ongoing, echoes through time. And you never know when they'll show up. So I'm having, let's just call it a kind of womb hysteria in the darkness of late. And hysteria means womb. Hyster or matrix also means womb. But it comes from this modern hysteria of the erotic crisis, he says, because of the ways we're raised, the way we're birthed, not always very in tune with the natural and the nature part of birthing. He says that this modern hysteria comes from the denial that we live within the womb of being. See, we think we're separate. We get cut at the umbilical cord. We get cut by putting a name on us that's different than everyone else. We get cut because we couldn't come put into a particular stream in the education system, perhaps like the smart ones, the dumb ones. And I was put into the lower cut all my life, as well as being raised working class, poor. And all of that adds to huge amounts of insult. Very subtle And I'm not saying that's to blame for everything that I do, and I'm not blaming anything because I'm ultimately responsible for my own healing and my agency to become what I can in this womb of being. So, what happens when the womb itself becomes scary? And that's part of what I'm talking about in my experience. I used to really love the dark, and I do at times, but right now, in the last 6, 8, 9 months, no, I'm really having to struggle and be very conscious. I have to breathe deep from the belly. I have to do these rituals, not because it's going to put me in a total panic, but I'm on the edge of panic in those spaces. And it also comes from, a struggle with the closeness of being with the mother and being in that really close, intimate relationship with a lover. And again, a lover then who can injure you, who can harm you. And for someone like myself, that creates a lot of conflict inside. And I'll be talking about the psychiatricing processing of my child within and my adolescents with that one, who I are both going to identify later in this video as protectors that they have and protectors that have come in, both me as an adult creating them, and I think some are just archetypal protectors that take over for the wounded psyche and the soul. But let's go back to this, just this brief entry by Sam Keen. We want to deny our helplessness and dependency. So the womb can bring up a sense of helplessness and lack of agency, which understandably, when you're in the womb, you don't have a lot of agency about the control of your life, and dependency. And so how safe was it in your experiencing of the womb space? But we accuse nature of being as careless as history, as warlike as nations, as mechanical and heartless as the machines we have created. She, capital S, has rejected, deserted, abandoned us. We are not encompassed in a careful matrix, but rather alone, anxious, abandoned, secretly ashamed. We are forced to create a system, a controlled environment, a mechanical complex, a defended establishment to ward off her hostile intent. So we're projecting a lot of fear onto the mother, the matrix, the womb. And that can breed a kind of hysteria, a phobic reaction. And then the counterphobic reaction formation to that wound of that sense of threat, insult, narcissistic wounding, where we can no longer trust even those who love us the most and maybe telling us the truth, as my partner was in her best intentions. And there's many others who have done this, not just her. And all of a sudden you realize you're now stirring a matrix of a whole lot of cultural. That's what the historical cultural context he's giving. This is not just personal psychology. This is sociological, historical. It's about oppressive systems and how they treat the mother and the matrix in the womb and how it gets medicalized and controlled and even weaponized. But that's a long story. And the struggle is for the child inside is to renegotiate, as I'm doing now. I have to re-embed myself in this careful matrix connectivity. I have to midwife myself. Again, is what I'm realizing here. I'm 73 years old. I'm midwifing my own birthing again. And it's really hard as a male who loves, quote, loves the autonomy, the individuality, the separation. When things get tight, I want to get out. I want to exit from the relational and slip away, have my individual time, and then, oh, okay, I'll come back into relationship. Look, I have a ton of experience, decades, 4 decades at least, of living in with intimate females. So it's not like I can't do it. I have a 35-year successful marriage right now, a partnership and the marriage as well. But I also have 42-year-old children who also are giving me feedback on things are not so great, especially one of them. But all of this is about the problem of me being both a parent as well as a father, as a lover, as a husband, right? As a partner, life partner for and in with this intimacy of possibility and all the hurts and injuries that come with it. I think maybe at age 73, you just get a lot more sensitive. Your nervous system is just a lot more on edge, doesn't like as much noise, doesn't like as much disturbance, doesn't like as much change. And that's why a lot of people can unfortunately get into living in old age homes and care homes, etc., or just even their own home and more or less start to become rather agoraphobic and just don't want change, don't want to be outside, don't want to be in environments where they feel out of control. Well, that's all part of what I'm experiencing right now. So I have a real sense of that within my own phobic reaction to this. I'll just call it the womb darkened state. Why can I not be fully calm in that like I used to be? Something has happened and something is happening, something's been triggered. This post traumatic ripple effect from the experience in the tent at night in a pup tent, um, near on the edge of panic, as I say, now is rippling. And I knew it would ripple because I would knew there was a phobic reaction. But the counterphobic that I mentioned earlier is the defense, it's the protection for I'm not afraid, I'll be tough, I can get my protectors, I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to mostly ignore or try to defend and attack back what feels like an attack from the other that is saying, not in all cases, but in the cases for me, good intentions, but not great delivery, not the best it could have been. And part of it is because I really believe, like Brene Brown and others have said in the psychological world of therapies, is that most of us now today, because we've been raised in this kind of world that Sam Keen just describes, very mechanicalized and quite harsh world, to be blunt, even though it has lots of comforts, but it's psychically and soulfully harsh and not very careful of a matrix. We have to teach under those conditions. We have to teach others how to treat us well. And I haven't always taken the time to do that. I have some, I write, I publish, because in a way, how I want to be treated is how I want others to be treated. How I want others to be treated is how I want to be treated. And today I'm speaking about my child per se. So let me just talk now in more detail about what I've been picking up about this wounded child in me and a worry syndrome. I have never been one, virtually, that I know of, to think of myself as a worryful person. Whoa, no, I'm not going there. That's not me. That's my mom. Now you're talking about. She is the worry wart of this century, as far as I'm concerned. Was, bless her heart, no longer with us. For lots of good reasons. I won't go into the history of my mom and her traumas. But I adopted some pretty complex traumas. And I was birthed in that womb in a world that was, for her, very unsafe. She was very paranoid and was diagnosed eventually with paranoid personality disorder in her late years. That didn't surprise me. Unfortunately, she just never ever got treatment. Therefore, the whole family system, myself included, didn't really know what was going on. And we were all just coping with strategies and ways to deal with this. Then I married a person who also had a psychotic, disorder, often brought on by excessive distress because they were worriers. Warriors, not warriors. Well, they look like warriors, both my mom and my ex, because they had amazing defense systems and could attack you or anyone, and did often psychologically, not physically, although I have been physically attacked slightly at times. But it's like it was just the worry was just this amazing energy and obviously like a neurotic obsession. They were obsessed by worrying about XYZ. And who knows how all that started right in their womb experiencing. Anyway, I inherited and I married into it. And so I've been in this matrix of worry, but I thought I was had such a good counterphobic reaction formation from my earliest childhood to not think that was anything about me. That was them worrying. So even in my fear management systems theory, which I've spent, 35 years or more of my professional life studying and enhancing and building a great theory, I think it's a marvelous theory. Hate to sound too arrogant there, but I think it is beyond doubt the most interesting and complicated and could be very effective systems of understanding fear management developmentally, evolutionarily. Besides that, you can read about that. You can listen to that on the internet. I've published lots on it. But what I've missed is I'll only put out a small phrase usually in my theorizing, which comes from reading several people like Gavin de Becker, for one, who's a fear expert as well, the same amount of time as I have been. And he's wrote the book Gift of Fear, but he talks about the power of worry. And when I was building and developing a lot of my theorizing, he had a lot to say that I thought was very useful and some I didn't think was so useful. And he said worry is the worst. It's like it's the darkest place of undermining yourself and your true fear signal system and its potentials to save you and rescue you and keep you from danger. So unfortunately, people who worry draw themselves into more danger. And if you've got a pattern of worrying and then don't know you have a pattern of worrying, me, then it's even more that you draw forward that which tells you and is trying to teach you from the world all these comments, criticisms, insults, oppressions. Not nice, not nasty. I don't support any of those. But they become teachers for you if you pay attention. And that's what I try to teach on these psychiatric encounter programs that I do. I just give you bits of ideas about how to think about some of these psychiatric processings. Here in this case, what's becoming very obsessive, for me to turn my mind off of going back and trying to attack one of the people or two of the people who I feel have insulted me in the last 6 months. Whoa, man, I cannot turn that switch off. And so I'm doing a lot of strategizing of how to, whoa, calm down, like calm down. And I'm going, oh, that's my inner child. Like that is my wounded child. That is my post-traumatic child and adolescent. Feeling rejected, abandoned, all those things that Sam King talked about that are in the culture, they're real, but like they're hyper stimulated, right? They're like inflated and they're constantly projecting at the target. So this is my protector, and do not mess with your protectors, people. And anybody who tries to mess with your protectors, i.e., your defense mechanisms, i.e., your counter reactions to phobias, etc., yeah, I'd be very cautious. You want them to really understand your protector. Talk to your protector. Really understand from you as you teach, and it's your responsibility to teach, to help them understand, right? Your protectors. I agree with Daniel Ford. He just says, he's a real super deep shamanic psycho practitioner, psychotherapeutic practitioner with a huge shamanic background, tradition, and initiated. And he says, do not mess with people's protectors. You mess with them in the wrong ways and you cause more harm, both to them and who knows what other kind of harm in other subtle realms of experiences and dimensions of relationality in the subtle sphere, the ecology of woundedness and protection. So Gavin DeBecker was talking about worry, and he said put it down so bad, but he didn't really respect the protector that goes with worry. So I have to say he was not the best teacher there. So now I'm coming to have to really reteach myself of my worry pattern, and I watch it in dreams, for example. Oh my gosh, if you really pay attention to dreams, especially of late, it's like, oh man. And then I can't sleep at night sometimes. Like I'm awake for hours and hours and my mind won't stop, right? It's just like going over and rehearsing. And oh, if I get a chance to say this to that person who attacked me, and I'll go back through time and but it's stimulated around the recent attacks, as I call them, in the name of truthing. But truthing given without understanding and being compassionate and empathetic fully with your protectors and the effect this might have on you, especially, and again, for people who do not have these complicated, complex trauma inter patterned in them as deeply as I do, autobiographically and historically, going probably back who knows how long to your ancestors. So, yeah, there's a lot of healing I'm doing that is also potentially ancestral healing. And luckily, my wife is into a lot of that and has experienced a lot. And she's got a lot to teach me too, and so on. So, but all of it at the same time, I'm just more and more vigilant. And like it or not, this is what I'm going through. I really don't like it. I would like to just be going on and have living a joyful life. Thank you very much. At my age, I don't want to be doing all this hard work. And yeah, so I've done some really good deep healing sessions on my own and a lot with Barbara's help. And it's good. And but it's just so gross when you get down into the core of this womb, fear, locked in, feeling contained and phobic reaction, right? Like I'm in containment and I don't feel like I'm the one control and containing something else as somebody else is these forces are. So I'm still trying to unravel those knots. I don't know how far I'll get in doing all that, but I know, and I certainly know from reading, I know enough from theoretically, is those wounds of darkness that I carry and have not healed, or I've not come to some kind of peace with them. They will carry me onto my deathbed, and they will carry me into worrying about dying. They will carry me into worrying about separation from this world, and it will be very hard to envision and imagine. Not just mentally, I can do that. I'm very good at that as a visionary, but to actually embody a new passage into a new state of being after death. But it's going through the passage of dying. That could be a long process depending on what kind of dying process you or I enter. So that's why I encourage you to do this child work. So let's get down to the specifics now, which I promised I would do, of how I'm dealing with this inner child, this wounded inner child around these circumstances of late. One of the things I know is that I have to give treats once in a while to when I feel just done a lot of hard, emotional, painful work, scary. Yep, when you're in those, healing places. And you don't always get through and come out wonderfully healed. Okay, that's not how it works. Sometimes, yeah, and rarely. And some good things come up, insights, but that doesn't mean you've healed that psychic wound. It's deep in the body and somatically, and I can feel it when I get touched in certain places. So, one of the things I'm trying to do with the obsession compulsive patterning of worrying, which is now I see is a counterattack, trying to criticize basically every moment, analyze every moment, because I'm incredibly analytically clever and able, and a lot of that is a really good skill in right context. But when it's attacking a person who's intimately in your life, and you're still going to have a relationship with them, I have to find some kind of resolve in that. So that's a difficult challenge, to say the least, because a part of me just wants to exit, or at least give a lot of space and then come back later when I'm not so hyper triggered and they are also perhaps not so hyper triggered and can be more observant and neutral. in trying to understand and be empathetic and compassionate with each other. And yes, whatever wounds we each have received from each other and continually are receiving because of the unhealedness of our relationship, you have to find a way to forgive and be compassionate in that space, but it's not easy. You just don't happen like this, in my experience. I haven't found a magic bullet for that. Some people think they have. So back to my experience, the way I'm dealing with the obsessiveness to want to, again, find that instant, that analytical patterning, family system patterning. It's not all about them personally. So my attacks are on all kinds of things, but within the family systems and in society systems. But the critique is like enormous. And that's a lot of my counterphobic reaction to, just like I critique my mom as being the worrier wart. And that's a horrible term to label on somebody who suffers from worrying. And those you're attacking their protectors and calling them warts. Well, that's what they felt like, and that phrase is in our society for a reason. It's not a pleasant thing to watch and be around people who worry way too much for the conditions that are now present. So a lot of their worry is from the past, right? And so it comes into and infuses and infects and pollutes the environment, and that's where people don't feel safe, as I haven't obviously most of my life with women. And of course, a lot of that is your mother and the womb and so on. But I know the womb is safe at some point. And I'm trying to find that again. So I'm trying to midwife myself into the womb space of death and dying. This is the hospicing myself. Some people say we need to be hospicing all of modernity, and Sam Keen would probably totally agree with that because we have such an erotic crisis. We have such a womb crisis. We have such a birthing crisis. It has become so fear-based. So back to how I'm dealing with it with my inner child is I have to treat it. I have to give treats, not just treat it, gotta fix you, because Michael, the adult, does not like living with this. It's no fun being worried and frightened and thinking, that they're going to attack you again. They're just waiting. You're so vulnerable when you feel a deep insult of the nature I'm talking about. And it's re-triggered. And there's been many insults that's built on and accumulated on. So it's hard to tell what's really real. That's an insult, but in some levels it doesn't matter on the first levels of this healing and recovery process, restoration. So treat your child, otherwise they will obsess you. So I treat them by talking to them and journaling and helping. They're telling me things. Okay, I got to listen to you. Why are you worrying? Why are you attacking them so much? I'm asking you right now as an adult, and I'm the director of this personality, by the way. You aren't. You're a part. So I give them a part, name their part. The adolescence, the protector, could be all kinds of parts. And the internal family systems theory has all these ideas of how to work with that, and it's quite successful as a therapeutic tool to name and identify a lot of your parts. I'm not talking about someone who has a multiple personality disorder. That's much more complex than what I'm talking about. But I have like 13, 14, 15 parts I've identified over the years. And they've flared up at different times, and they'll take over parts, and then I have to kind of direct them back into an integrative working space, operational space. So I might yell because they're all there for me, like more or less. Like we have to get it together, folks, right? Like I'm talking all my parts. So you can see I want to be playful, and I'm taking very seriously what's going on because it's not fun. It is really not a fun experiencing when a part starts to take over, and especially one that can be, quite destructive. It's kind of like a child running around a house in a rage fit, for example, and you're the adult and you have to stop them. You cannot let them completely destroy the environment. And it upsets a lot of the other parts that I have that don't want to be upset by that, and it scares some of my parts. And it scares, in a sense, the adult in me because I feel out of control of being able to control that mind, right? So you could learn cognitive behavioral techniques and how to talk to yourself, how to change the wording and that. Well, I'm not saying those may not be useful, but that's what I'm having to learn is phenomenologically really to be in touch with this as I have been. And again, I do journal and process daily on this, lots of hours actually, more than I would like. I'd rather be having a good time or doing effective work and world work that's on a larger scale. But I have to do a lot of restoration of myself right now, this last 6, 8 months, because of these conditions that have happened and these comments given to me. And what I find is that I've talked about touch with my parts. So I have an adolescent part as well that's constantly looking for an out and wants to find a new sexual girlfriend or not sexual. And it's just like fantasies, right? And it's just like constantly, who, where can I go? Somewhere better and safer and smoother and sweeter than the females that I'm surrounded by now. Oh, that one's heavy too. That's my 14-year-old protector, and looking for better alternatives that are not so yucky, not so shameful, triggering, not so insulting, triggering relationships where you really feel some sweetness and honey. So again, I can physically treat myself with some of those kinds of things. You don't want to get addicted to it because of as a defense mechanism. Not be good for your health. So see, I talk to my parts. Come on, parts. We all want to be healthy here. You want Mikey L to be a really healthy guy, right? That's why you're there. That's why you're talking to me. You're trying to give me messages how to be a more healthy whole person. And I go, great, great. That's good psychiatry. Yeah, I have my psychiatric friends, 13, 14, 15 of them. I haven't counted them all lately, but I know one time I had 13, 10, 20 years ago. Anyways, it's like, okay, so I got to tell you, if you're going to treat me, so that we get better here as a whole, and we all get along and aren't scaring each other and or undermining each other, and some of them gang up and, really can get strong. And the teenagers sometimes with that early child, they get together and like, I can barely get my mind to focus. Like, I really got to pull hard. I got to talk to them. I got to pull it back. I got to find ways to distract, to not get on that. It happens so fast. So I say, okay, well, I'm going to touch myself. Every time I see you trying to critique, so right now I'm talking to those protectors. It took me a while, months to figure this strategy out, and it seems to be working. Question mark. As a process. And I'm going to touch myself really gently on my third eye. I also do a lot of artwork therapeutically for myself. So I have many strategies, and it's hard to tell what's actually impacting what, but the latest one is this one feels really useful. Is I just say, when I hear you wanting to go, and there goes the voice, I just pull it back. I say, no. It says, I'm just going to touch myself here because this is about caring. And when I touch myself really gently in the third eye, what I found, and this was phenomenologically, I intuited this. This is like my spiritual whole self, and this is the spiritual feminine that cares, that is mindful, that is sweet and milk and honey, but for a higher purpose, not all those lower needs and purposes down to your gonads. And so that's part of the arising. This is the stimulating of what you could call that tantric kundalini potential for arising to the better, to the fuller, the higher, some people would call it self. But that's what I says, this is what I want. See, I say, okay, I hear you. I hear you going off. I've acknowledged you. You're in my journal. I've given you voice. I found out kind of why you're doing it, why you're obsessing on this. I think you're obsessing. You probably don't. Sorry. Maybe I shouldn't be calling obsessed, but I feel obsessed. Okay, so I'll put it on me as our Michael Fisher. And then so that intervenes. And see, what I do is I put the attack, the counterphobic critique, very sophisticated sometimes, and I put it right here. And I just lightly touch and might hold, and then sometimes I just hold my face, cover my eyes, and I've even sometimes covered my ears because I want to feel the hands of the goddess. So this is the way I talk what inside to them and do these just really quick corrections. And it's like because Michael loves that, loves to be touched by the goddess. He always has that. The womb is the goddess chamber. Why would you not want to be in there? And so on and so on. You can see where this could go. I'm just barely starting this, so, folks. So, wanted to share this video with you of some of those technique strategies. I've shared a lot of vocabulary with you, shared a little bit of Sam Keene's reading. If you want to know more about any of that, let me know. And thanks for listening tonight. And put your comments below. And I'm glad to have a conversation with you. All the best on your enjoyment of life, and that goes for me too. And all the best on healing our, phobias and worries and reframing them. So a lot of tonight was what's called psychiatric or psychological reframing. Have a good day.